Welcome to episode 87 of The Lowdown Show. I'm Neil Graham. Michael Uhlarik from Motorcycle Global joins me to talk about a smattering of things that perplex me. For instance, I wanted to know how a designer like Michael approaches mirrors and seats. Are they for function or are they for aesthetics? I think I know the answer to this one. And then we talk about the most unusual motorcycle in the marketplace today, Kawasaki's little 400cc 4-cylinder ZX4R. Now, here's a bike that got me excited. High specification, small displacement motorcycles are absolute gems, but they're a segment almost universally ignored by OEMs. Well, why is this? First of all, Michael encourages me to calm down, and then he throws cold water on my naive ideals of a diminutive KTM adventure built to the same standards as the bloated 1290 adventure. Bigger is not better, but don't trust me. Talk to your doctor. But first, a few words from those who make the Lowdown possible. The Lowdown Show is presented by adbrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. With their new secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your car, it's where you buy it, start to finish. Title, financing, registration, delivery. It's all built in. And eligible vehicle purchases are backed by up to $100,000 in protection. This is what modern car buying looks like. Get your next ride on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure Purchase is powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary. In over 50 years of connecting riders to dirt, Fox Racing has learned that the best gear always has a discernible purpose and a strong point of view. The Ranger Defend and Recon Adventure Collection takes a minimalist approach to product design, with a clear mission of providing everything you need in adventure-ready gear and absolutely nothing you don't need. Minimalist chassis, fully seam sealed with Gore-Tex waterproofing and D30 CE level protection across the board. This gear is every bit as pure as the adventure you're chasing. Michael, great to see you again.
Nice to be here.
All right, let's jump into it. I did a thing, a previous podcast about a gentleman who made aftermarket mirrors. So we had a long conversation about mirrors. And the reason I got onto mirrors was because I was riding their motorcycles. We ride motorcycles. Back south from your hometown of Sudbury, Ontario. And the mirror on the Triumph Tiger that I was on loosened up and started spinning. So every time I had to pass someone, I had to grab the stalk, hold it, pass, and then it would flop in the breeze again. So mirrors are essential. So I got thinking about mirrors and then seats. And these are things that we buy in a dealership when we go to buy a motorcycle. We're not really thinking about these things. We only notice a seat if it looks ugly, meaning too fat, or mirrors that are too, stick out too far or too obtrusive, visually obtrusive. So from a design perspective, are those things that present peculiar difficulties to you as a designer?
Two very different components. One, which is totally integral to the fundamental layout and shape of a motorcycle, and the other is almost always an afterthought.
You're referring to the mirrors as the afterthought.
Clearly. So let's dispense the mirrors right away. In the design process, whether you're a design engineer or an industrial designer, you don't think about the mirrors almost ever. On street legal super sport motorcycles and touring motorcycles, back when we still used to make them, sometimes mirrors are molded into the body as a concept. Think Kawasaki ZZR, the Honda Blackbird, various BMW K series, where the mirror was like a very big, prominent piece of the design, very automotive approach. They were body colored. They weren't black. They sometimes had integrated turn signals. But 98% of the time, it's a question of what's in the catalog of our manufacturer of existing mirrors, and that we can just put on there. If it's a handlebar mounted mirror, like on adventure bikes or naked motorcycles, which make up 98% of the world's motorcycles, it is quite literally a catalog part. So very little thinking goes into it. If you're a responsible manufacturer, i.e. Japanese, maybe BMW, then you actually conduct real tests to make sure that your catalog mirror works, you know, that the angle and length of the rod clears the shoulder, so that, you know, the average, the, you know, 50th percentile human being sits on the motorcycle and they're not looking at their shoulder or their head or, you know, something else, that it actually is functional. You know, reputable manufacturers go to reputable suppliers. There are companies that just make mirrors and accessories, and there are good ones in Europe and in Asia, and they test them for NVH, noise and vibration, and well, not noise, but for vibration and quality. And so you can feel very confident that they're going to be good enough. And that's it. That's the sum total of mirror design. Seats.
So hang on, before we leave mirrors.
Yeah.
So it sort of sounds like that you know, some brands test so you get a sharp view of your shoulders going through space, and other brands just wing it. But like all mirrors would be better. I mean, it's a generalization, but we're friends. I mean, most mirrors would be better 4 inches outboard. I mean, it just would be. But of course, I mean, at some point, your aesthetics do play a part in this, don't they?
Hugely.
Yeah.
I don't know a single designer outside of Honda which requires, and some, actually many Chinese brands, final design approval requires absolute meticulous, like real world sketch that is like down to the scale and number of screws. I'm not exaggerating. Like if you don't put a screw on the drawing, the question will be, how is this attached? And if you don't have an answer, then they will reject the concept. But, you know, designers don't draw mirrors on their bikes, and there's a reason for that. Mirrors are awkward. You know, here you are, if you're doing any kind of faired vehicle, even adventure bikes, which now are basically fully faired motorcycles, or half faired, charitably called half faired motorcycles. Tons of bodywork. You know, putting this essentially plate glass panel perpendicular to the airflow is counterintuitive visually, and you don't have to be a designer to understand that. Like it's just something you don't want to deal with. And a good designer doesn't ignore things that are bad. But, you know, I've been in this business half my life, and I've worked with designers in Europe and Asia and Japan and China, and, you know, they all do that. They all do it. We all ignore it. Should the mirror be bigger physically to be functional? Maybe, yeah, probably. I will say this, last comment on mirrors. Mirrors have gotten decidedly smaller in my career. They were much more functional. Anyone who owns a motorcycle from the 80s, any motorcycle from the 80s, knows what I mean.
Yeah.
And the early 90s. And then they started shrinking because the Italians did it. You know, they put mirrors on to just barely pass homologation, that were really small. And then the whole tuning culture, think Rizoma and these guys who put like a mirror the size of, you know, the palm of your hand hanging just below the handlebar, so that you can pass your local, national, whatever it is, the equivalent of an MOT or MVI or, you know, DOT, local registration, certificate of conformity. You know, it got normalized. And so even the Japanese, so this is the way it works. The Japanese set standards in the 60s, 70s, and 80s for maximum reliability and usability of motorcycles to an automotive standard. And everyone followed them because they were the market leaders. Then in the 90s, really principally because of one man, Massimo Tamburini, and his incredibly stubborn, this is how the bike shall be, Ducati and then later MV Agusta started to cheat, quite frankly. And, you know, then other European studios, Kiska, which is responsible for KTM and later Husqvarna, and then even European studios of Japanese factories. I know I was one of them. You know, we started saying, well, these guys are doing that. And that's a bestseller, like, or that's really popular. And then slowly we ground down our Japanese overlords, who were, look, Yamaha Technical Standards Manual, which is the size of a telephone book, that says the front fender shall be this many millimeters off the ETRTO size of the tire, blah 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 blah. And so fenders were really high off a wheel, and mirrors were so big. We just started to go, well, this is an Aprilia, and it looks better and it sells better than our 50cc motorcycle, and the fender is like this. And they'd be like, yeah, you have a point. And so standards started to go the other way, and turn signals became, well, turn signals are governed by government, like by the color, the brightness, their visibility. But there is a certain degree of latitude when it comes to things like mirrors. And as long as the object is visible, even the German TÜV has accepted smaller and less functional mirrors. So yes, mirrors are less functional today than they were 25 years ago or even 20 years ago. And before you go stomping off, oh, the manufacturers are lazy, don't care. Listen, motorcyclist to motorcyclist, I don't trust my mirrors unless I'm on an older Japanese motorcycle. I look over my shoulder. Otherwise, it's just an exercise in frustration. So I just do a shoulder check always. My head is always on a swivel. And, knock on wood, I've been riding for 35 years and I haven't had a serious accident. So maybe that's partly why.
I'm usually looking for creditors as well. So extra motivation to
keep your eye on the sides.
Yeah. The Lowdown Show is presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. Let's move on to seats, because it's one thing, mirrors are one thing, but seats are very important. And one of the first things people do often is change a seat out, or one of my favorite things, which is the manufacturer offers the comfort seat, to which I always think, well, why not just put the comfort seat on the bike as opposed to making us buy the comfort seat? Because by inference, of course, that means the seat on it is the discomfort seat. Okay, seats from a design standpoint.
It is roughly analogous to what I was saying about mirrors. I mean, a motorcycle, like an automobile, more so, is an emotional purchase first and a rational purchase second. You can see many examples of this throughout recent history. And I will again lean on BMW, not because I'm punching on them. BMW, when I came of age, when I was a child, teenager, made what in retrospect were breathtakingly mature and I think quite elegant motorcycles. And I'm talking about the K series, the triples, the inline fours, the K1. That was modern motorcycling. That was modern design. They were super functional, super comfortable. They lasted a long time. None of these things mattered to a 16-year-old who liked motorcycles, of course. But even then, I remember thinking they looked quite sophisticated compared to a lot of the go fast stuff from Japan, from Japanese brands. The trouble is that BMW nearly went bankrupt. I mean, not the mothership, but the motorcycle division, because there are only so many old men who want extremely practical, comfortable, long distance touring motorcycles at astronomical prices. Who knew? And basically police forces were the last stable source of income for BMW for a long time. I use this as an illustration. When BMW started to be irrational, my whole, early life, it was, to expand on this example, BMW insisted on split turn signal switchgear. A right turn meant a right button click, a left turn meant a left button click. BMW insisted that the telescopic fork was stupid, that we should all be using a Hossack type fork, a wishbone fork, which their version is called telelever. That every motorcycle should be a shaft-driven motorcycle because it's clean and maintenance-free and will do 1,000,000 kilometers, without maintenance. They were right about most of those things. And yet nobody really wanted their motorcycles. Then they basically got Aprilia to do a Hail Mary, and that's the F650, the original F650 GS. No, it wasn't even actually called that. It was the F650. That's it. Designed and engineered in Italy by Italians, and it had normal switchgear and a telescopic fork, and it had a chain drive, and it was the best-selling BMW motorcycle since Zavol. And, you know, turns out you got to give people what they want. So when it comes to saddle design, the principal function is, of course, comfort. However, the seat forms such a large part visually of the motorcycle from every view, except a direct head-on view. You're almost always looking at the seat.
Yeah.
It has to be attractive. And I'm not talking about stitch lines and fabrics, CMF, color, material, finishes. That's obviously important. I'm talking about shape. You know, you may recall that, you know, in the 70s, motorcycle seats from the 60s and 70s were just a plank shape. It was just a big foam cushion with no definition. And then in the 70s, when custom became the craze, they got a step where the passenger seat came up off the driver's seat. So
the king and queen.
The king and queen, right? And you know, suddenly every Japanese UJM had that kind of custom version, you know, with the ape hanger handlebar and the stepped seat and the horizontal, like transverse, like faux stitching, make it look like the seat of a Camaro. That's just fashion. Okay, raising the passenger even just a few centimeters makes it harder for them to get on and off. It totally ruins the handling of a motorcycle. You know this. If your passenger is up high, if you're carrying a weight up high in the back, it's terrible. That's my way of illustrating yet again that these things are driven by fashion. They're driven by subjective needs and desires by the consumer. I'll give you one last example that's more contemporary. So sport motorcycles, the most successful sport motorcycle in history is the CBR 600. That vehicle launched as the Hurricane, then became the F, then the F2. It's still sort of in production, as in like it's highly, highly modified, different frame, different body, but it still exists somewhat spiritually. The motor is the same in the CBR 650 F or R, I don't know what they call it now. Sport motorcycles for 15 years were real world motorcycles with sporting elements. They had a single piece driver passenger seat that had deep cushioning, and handlebars were low compared to a conventional motorcycle, but they were still above the triple clamp. The point was you could ride a YZF 600 Yamaha or the early ZZR 600s. Today, they would be considered sport touring because you could ride them 8 hours. If you were reasonably fit, you could ride them all day with a passenger. What happened was we got into an arms race visually, emotionally. And it starts with the Fireblade, the first CBR 900 RR, which still had a lot of practicality, but it split the seat. The seat was two pieces now, the rider seat and the passenger seat. Now, GSX Star did this briefly, but Honda really solidified it because it was such a big seller. And then Yamaha does it with the R1, which really apes the race bike, where the seat looks like a race bike seat, which is, for those of you who don't race or do track days, is a hard foam pad, like the kind of material, normally you would find in a drawer of your tool chest to deaden the sound of wrenches.
The floor in a gym or something like that.
The floor in a gym, yeah, a yoga mat, yeah. And it was cushioned, but not deeply cushioned. And the passenger accommodation shrunk to the point of to the point of being functionally worthless and earning itself a slang term, which I won't repeat because it's extraordinarily vulgar. But it was, at some point, some passenger accommodation seat on sport models was slightly larger than a beer mat, a coaster, and about as comfortable. And the reason we did this, did human posteriors change? No, they did not.
If anything, they went the other way, like a bigger.
If anything, they went the other way. It was purely appearance. I want my sport bike to look like a race bike. I want my, my naked motorcycle to look like a cafe racer. So suddenly everything's got this like cross-stitched, saddle-stitched hump, like it's just driven by that. Because at the end of the day, if you want a motorcycle that you're going to drive across the country in comfort, you're going to get a Road King or a Goldwing or, a Multistrada or, a Yamaha Tracer 9. You're going to get a motorcycle that all those vehicles, they're not adventure bikes. They're not baggers. They are touring motorcycles. They look totally different. They have different technologies, but their ergonomics are more or less the same. Your hip is behind your feet and your hands rest like in a relaxed fashion, in a natural position on controls. And the seat is deeply cushioned because, it's narrower at the front, it's wider at the back like a tractor seat, because that's how human bottom ends are shaped. But it's not very nice to look at. That customer doesn't care. On the slick, more, let's say design sensitive adventure bikes, and I think Yamaha probably does the best job of this. That tractor saddle shape is sculpted in a way, and the materials and the parts around it are done in such a way as to hide the fact that it's a tractor seat, but it's a tractor seat. But you can't sell a conventional motorcycle in any typology with that shape because people wouldn't buy it.
At least not anymore. Although, I put 10,000 miles on a 1947 Indian,
which had a tractor seat,
and at that point it was a true tractor seat. And, it wasn't, it was, 3 or 4 inches wide at the front, very narrow. And then truly, it would not have looked, on a tractor, it would have been steel and not padded because of course, weather. But it was astonishingly comfortable.
Yep. And if you look, my wife has 2 bicycles, one contemporary hybrid touring bicycle with a contemporary saddle. And then she has a vintage Raleigh, a made in England 3-speed, beautiful Raleigh coaster bike. And it has one of those sprung wide tractor shape. And it looks ridiculous until you sit on it. And then you're like, oh, wow. And as someone who considers himself a pretty avid cyclist, I have many bicycles. I still have my road racing bike. It's right there, actually, right here in the office. The racing saddle I have, and this is a racing saddle designed to accommodate men over 50, and those cyclists listening will know what I mean, is still a hard, unpleasant thing compared to that tractor seat, which is deeply cushioned and independently sprung. But I'm not going to put that on my featherweight Italian road racing bicycle purely out of vanity, if nothing else.
Oh, we are flawed creatures.
I will give you one more thought on this. I actually posted on LinkedIn about this because BMW has gone from one extreme to the other in the span of my professional lifetime. They went from making motorcycles that truly embraced industrial design in its German roots, Bauhaus thinking, functionality, the complete circle of aesthetics, engineering, ergonomics, manufacturing all together in this. I really praise the K series for that synthesis. It is a brilliant product. And now they make abject trash from an industrial design point of view, which I really have to say is typified by their electric offerings. Because if you look at the seats of the C03s, C04s, C02 electric mopeds,
It's a rejection of the human anatomy, isn't it?
it's a plank. It is
Yeah.
actually a board.
Yeah.
It is completely flat in every dimension. Sitting on it for 2 minutes at a trade show is akin to sitting on a bench. The idea that this is a commuter vehicle, that this is something that you spend a lot of money on, because they are BMW, so they are wildly, premium priced. They look cool, I guess, from a distance, but they're clearly designed by people who are designers in love with their own drawing, and the marketing team has sold it as, this is the future. It looks really good as a prop in a sci-fi movie, but I'm sorry, just, what's the best-selling moped in Europe? It's a Honda SH. Look at the seat of that thing. From the side, from the front, from every view normal person would view it, it looks like a moped seat until you're standing in front of it looking straight down. Guess what shape it has? It's a tractor seat.
Yeah.
Honda is practicing modern, professional, industrial design. The principles are you have to accept people and reality for what it is, and yet they are able to make these products profitably, and they're hugely successful. So you can't tell me that you can't design an attractive moped, step-through scooter. And on the high-performance step-through scooter, Yamaha T-Max is still king. Also very sculpted driver's seat. You can sit in a T-Max for 8 hours with a passenger.
At a trade show.
Without actually going anywhere. Yeah. So yeah, it's design. I'm a designer. I love experimenting and trying to change perceptions and play with what is possible. But you can't fight reality. At some point, you just have to accept, like, these are the constraints. And great design is accepting constraints and working with them, turning a disadvantage into an advantage, if at all possible.
eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. It's all thanks to their new secure purchase. Ever try to buy a car and end up in a parking lot with a stranger in some blind trust? Or spend half the day at a dealership talking to pushy salespeople and signing paperwork? Or maybe, worst of all, waiting for hours at the DMV just to transfer the title? Well, that era is over. For years, eBay has been the go-to for gearheads, collectors, and do-it-yourselfers, because whatever you're into, from classics to SUVs to trucks to imports, eBay's got it. And now with secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your next ride, it's where you can buy it, start to finish. Sellers and titles are verified, paperwork is handled by experts, and payments are traceable and digital. So you know exactly who you're dealing with and exactly what you're getting. Plus, you can finance, insure, and register your vehicle all in one place. No more hours at the dealership, no more trips to the DMV. Get your vehicle plates and paperwork shipped to your door, ready to drive. And it's all part of one seamless process, designed to feel as easy as buying anything else online. And eligible vehicles purchased on eBay are backed by up to $100,000 in purchase protection. Thinking about selling your ride? Secure Purchase makes that simple too, because you know your buyer and their funds are verified. If you still own your car, the financing payoff is fully integrated, so you're not chasing paperwork or waiting on checks to clear. And with Secure Purchase, you get paid fast, and you're not going to be stuck chasing no-shows or answering the fifth, "Is it still available?" message. This is what modern car buying looks like. Skip the DMV, skip the sketchy meetups, buy it on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure Purchase is powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary. In over 50 years of connecting riders to dirt, Fox Racing has learned that the best gear always has a discernible purpose and a strong point of view. The Ranger Defend and Recon Adventure Collection takes a minimalist approach to product design, with a clear mission of providing everything you need in adventure-ready gear and absolutely nothing you don't need. Minimalist chassis, fully seam sealed with Gore-Tex waterproofing and D30 CE level protection across the board. This gear is every bit as pure as the adventure you're chasing. Okay, let's talk about displacement creep. This summer, I rode a 1290 KTM adventure into the far north, and it is so huge. I was actually shocked because I've seen lots of pictures of them, and they look kind of, the same as everything else. But then you get on it, and they are so broad; it's absurdly huge. And one of my favorite bikes, well, my absolute favorite ADV style motorcycles, the old 950, 990 KTMs. With their Austrian army surplus aesthetic, which I adored. There's no need for that bike to get that big. And then I was thinking about what's the most interesting motorcycle I think in the market today, which is the Kawasaki's Ninja ZX4R, 398cc, 4-cylinder, high revving, $9,300 US funds. Now, of course, you can buy a Ninja 500 for $5,400 or a Ninja 650 for $7,600. So smaller really is better, but of course, as bikes are smaller, they typically don't get the nice finishes or the nice equipment, brakes, and so on of bigger bikes. So they're always kind of thought of as cheaper. But here's my question to you, Michael: is that what if Ducati came out with say a 600 Panigale, a 75 horsepower V-twin, exquisitely designed, nice Brembo brakes, but it weighed, 370 pounds. I mean, that would be the ideal street bike because you could exercise it on public roads vigorously without, going 140 miles an hour. And yet this will almost never happen. And I think the Ninja ZX4R really shows us that it's a real anomaly in our marketplace.
Yeah. It'll never happen for the same reason. Well, it'll never happen is hard to say because
it'll rarely happen because Kawasaki did it with the Ninja, but
Kawasaki did it with a Ninja, and Aprilia did it first with the RS660 and now the RS457.
But hang on a second, aren't those are kind of mundane twins?
They are not. So the 457 is a little down spec, but the 660 is exquisitely specified. It can play with a Japanese inline 4 throughout most of the performance envelope, except on the straightaway. And that was the point. They tried to create a hedge. They tried to say, well, all right, everybody's doing these twins. We're going to up spec our twin. We're going to make our twin come with high performance aluminum cast frame, not a steel frame like all the other twins that have a couple of applique aluminum bits tacked on. It was going to come with high spec brakes, high spec wheels. It is very high spec. It doesn't make a dent in the market. The same with the little Kawasaki. It will sell in very small numbers.
In fact, I was sorry to interject here, but I was looking at the Canadian Kawasaki website, and they have the 2024, 2025, and 2026 ZX4
listed because they're in inventory. Yeah,
they've got a few kicking around. So make a deal, folks, if this motivates you.
The problem is the same in automotive. Why are people buying 3-row SUVs? Because they had a baby. Why are guys who maybe do something, with their pickup truck once, every 3-4 months, buy a four-wheel drive crew cab pickup? And why is a pickup today 20% larger in every dimension than the same class of truck 25 years ago? Vehicles get bigger and they get heavier, and automotive car, weight goes up because we expect more from cars in terms of safety. There's a reason why people don't die in collisions as much as they used to. That safety system is, sophistication, airbags, tensioners, crumpling, shotgun rails in the front that didn't exist before because we have better materials, better understanding of deformation, but also just heavier object survives impact, protects occupants better than lighter object. With motorcycles are getting heavier. Combustion motorcycles are getting heavier because we are having to put more and more some safety systems, They're not that. ABS module is not that heavy. Brake pump isn't that heavy, but it's the emission stuff. Motorcycle is a small object, small vehicle system. And when you add a pre-catalyzer or a catalyzer and giant exhaust system and a giant airbox and you start to add a lot of volume, a lot of parts, and even just 4, 5, 6 kilograms of added weight in the exhaust induction system has a corollary effect. Every kilo you add, you can basically triple. That's kind of the rule of thumb in design. For every gram you take away, you can take away 3, because you add more weight. Now the structure holding that on has to be beefier.
And so you need a stronger frame, or
you need a stronger tab, right. And you need a bigger reinforcement, and it adds up. It's maybe not 1 for 1, but it's like, and then, now the vehicle system is heavier. I need more energy, i.e. fuel, to move that vehicle system at the same, to meet the same performance. So vehicles get heavier, vehicles get more capable, and they are. The cars and motorcycles are so much better now in almost every way than they were 10 years ago, 20, 50, you can go back. But that also means cost. And there is an inverse relationship in the perception. And this is the key. This is a product planning. This is a choice. It is not a requirement. That KTM that you drove, that you say, why is this thing so big and unwieldy? It's big and unwieldy for the same reason the new Multistrada is gigantic in every dimension. It's ridiculously wide in the front, in the back, too tall. The GS 1200 or 1300 or whatever the hell it's called now, same thing. Why are they so big? Do they need to be that big? Actually, I should stop bashing BMW. To their credit, the latest GS has slimmed down quite a lot. But why do these bikes get bigger? Because there is a perception that it is worth more. Why is a Ram 1500, what is the front of a Ram 1500 pickup truck the shape that it is? Does that front need to be that tall? No, it does not. It's perception. It makes it look butch. It makes it look more substantial. It makes it look more powerful. The radiator can get all the air it needs from under the bumper, but we put a big grill with extra slots and vents, and because vents, we've been trained through products and aerospace products, and just the humans with no design understanding have been trained over decades to understand that vents and air outlets and air intakes equals performance. Most people don't understand why. They read that. And so the scale of an adventure bike is suggestive of value. And these bikes are $25K, 30 fully optioned US, like they're extraordinarily expensive. And the reality is that adding 10% more plastic does not add 10% more to the cost. It adds 10% more to the perceived value. So you can justify the higher price, you can justify the higher valuation. And then, automotive analogy sticks, you can have a lower technology vehicle. I'm going to go back to the pickup truck, ladder frame construction, not particularly high technology construction materials or anything. The engines are not particularly high performance, but you can charge premium car money for what is essentially a dressed up tractor. And the adventure motorcycle is a dressed up naked motorcycle with long travel forks. And yes, some pretty impressive, sophisticated software modules. And the performance off-road is pretty good for something that big and unwieldy. But it's not better than a 450cc dual sport. In fact, it is markedly worse because physics, you're fighting physics. But you can't make a lot of profit margin on that 450.
Right.
And we come back to your question. Can you make a lot, even at 9,000 or whatever, close to 10K, that Kawasaki, that Ninja 400, exquisite as it is, they're not making a lot of profit on it, because making a high revving, 4-cylinder, 4-valve, twin cam, variable valve timing, jewel of a motor with a quick shifter and race ABS and lightweight and, forged wheels, that's expensive. But you can make a pretty good margin on that Ninja 500 because it's basically a naked motorcycle dressed up as a sport bike.
Do you think that Kawasaki would make more on a $5,400 500 Ninja than the ZX4R?
Oh, no question. Okay. No question. As a percentage, as a total sum, then the margin will be bigger on the 400 just because it's twice the price. But the R&D cost, the production cost, and fundamentally the sales volume is just not going to be there. The volumes on those 650 twins, monstrous, huge. So if you're only making $1,000 a bike or $800 a bike, but you're selling 80,000 of them a year or 150,000 of them a year, like Yamaha does with their MT-07, and then same engine in the Tenere, and same engine in the Tracer 7, and same engine in the XSR7. Now you see the game. This is how you make money in the motorcycle business. And the reality is that for the designer and the product planner working hand in hand, it comes back to what I was saying about the holistic view when I was describing BMW's approach to the K series back in the day. You got to keep your eye on the big picture. We all of us in the industry, like when we work on a program, the enthusiast wants the top spec. Why can't I get, an ADV rider, the forums and the comment section? I want tubeless wheels. I want this kind of fork. And I often read, oh, it would only cost Honda a few bucks to put on a better fork. That's not true. And the reality is, even if it was only, quote, a few bucks, it's a product holistically. And that's not market speak. That's like, you're building a whole house, to use a metaphor. You can put the gold-plated toilet and make the bathroom this incredible jewel because that's what's important to you. But it's going to look a little weird if the rest of the house is like Home Depot kitchen and vinyl flooring.
My God, you've just described my house.
I always knew you had a.
You always knew, didn't you?
I did. But so the point is, this is a business, as I keep saying, reminding people, we are enthusiasts. Even the people inside industry, we are enthusiasts. But we are also in the business of making profitable vehicles. At least that's the goal. And, high spec motorcycles in small production runs, they feed our soul, but they rarely make a lot of money. And they rarely bring a big return, if any, to the manufacturer, particularly small manufacturers, of which all of Europe's manufacturers are small manufacturers. BMW might hit 300,000 vehicles, but KTM imploded. They're never going to come back to those volumes. And if they do, it's because they will follow the Japanese model of making bikes that are good enough at a price that people can actually afford and that don't have melting camshafts. That's kind of the holy grail.
eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. Ever try to buy a car online and end up in a parking lot with a stranger and some blind trust? Well, that era is over. Now, with secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your car, it's where you buy it, start to finish. Title, financing, registration, delivery. It's all built in. This is the modern way to buy your next ride on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure purchase is powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary. Thank you for listening to The Lowdown Show.